Hello YouTube pipers. Putting that up for some breeze here. Right now it's about 90 degrees outside. Once again I'm going to use my brand new pipe and I'm going to fill it with velvet. Three pokes of tobacco, like I think I heard somewhere you're supposed to do it that way. Get the pouch back, empty what came into that, back into the pouch, and fold the pouch back up. Tobacco. I put my rubber bit on there. I wish it was the white one, but it's the black one. Takes away from the stem. Doggone it. Has anybody seen the white ones that you can order here? I've seen where you can order them on AliExpress, but that's like a 3-month wait from not from China. Plus, I don't guess it would be patriotic to buy from China right now. I don't know if that matters, actually, the way things are going. China owns half of us already. Talk about a cloud. I have a beverage in my Ghostbusters mug. Because the temperature out there is about 90. No clouds in the sky. Perfect day to cut the lawn. But it's too hot for me. When I was a kid, and big enough to cut the lawn, my dad never would let me. There was a Saturday, well, anytime it was time to cut the lawn, this is how it went. Except this particular time I'm talking about, he told me he wanted me to cut it. And I looked at him and said, "You want me to cut it?" He said, "Yeah, I thought maybe it'd be about time for you to learn how to cut the lawn. You're big enough now, you can handle it." I said, "Yeah, I'd like to cut the lawn." So he said, "Well, after breakfast, we'll go out there and get it started up for you, and you can take it away." Well, I knew that wasn't quite right, because this is what happened every time he wanted to go out and cut the lawn. We had the oldest lawnmower on the block. Well, we finished up breakfast. We both walked outside. And he told me to get the lawnmower. He had built a little lean-to where he put it under and locked the door to keep the rain from getting on it. So I went over and unlocked it and opened the door, and it took me a little while to drag it out because it was a heavy old machine and it was kind of wedged in there. But anyway, it took a little while. I finally, after grunting and groaning and pulling and sweating, I got it out and I pushed it over to him under the carport. As he was sitting there, kind of smiling, watching me do that, and he'd get the cord, he'd put the knot in the little groove and wind it around the top. Put his foot on the lawnmower and pull that rope. And the lawnmower would go. Well, he'd do that 2 or 3 times. Then he'd open up the gas tank and look in and say, "Rick, go get the gas can." And I'd go get the gas can and lug it over. 5 gallons of gas for a kid that size was kind of heavy. I'd get it there and he'd pour the gas into the gas tank, close it back up and put it to the side. And he'd get the rope, put it in the groove, wind it around, put his foot on the lawnmower and yank it. And it would sputter. Then he'd do the same thing again. Wind it around, pull the rope, and it would sputter. And sputter almost to life and then die down again. Well, he'd try it again. Almost come to life, die again. Then he'd say, "Go get my toolbox, Rick." Or son. He'd say, "Go get my toolbox, son." So I'd go get his toolbox, which was a lot heavier than the gas can, but I'd be at like a 45-degree angle hanging onto that thing, taking it over to him. Put it down, clunk. All the tools inside would rattle. He'd open it up. And he'd get the tool he wanted. He'd say, "Well, it sounds like something wrong with the spark plug." So he'd undo the spark plug and look at it and say, "Yeah, it's really dirty. See if there's an emery board in there, son." So I look around and I couldn't find anything. He said, "Well, go ask your mother if she's got an emery board I can use." So I'd come inside, get an emery board from Mom, because she would have to stop what she's doing and look through all the drawers until she could find one. She would hand it to me, and I'd run back outside, and he'd be there just working away on that spark plug with an emery board he had found inside the tool chest. And I'd say, "Here's the one Mom found." And he said, "That's good, because this one doesn't have any grit on it." So he'd toss that one back into the toolbox and use the new one, clean it up. And he'd say, "How about go ask your mother for a dish, son?" A bowl, so I can put some gas in it. So I'd come inside. I'd say, "Mom, Dad needs a bowl. He wants to put some gas in it." She'd stop what she was doing again, go over to the cabinet and find an old bowl, because she knew that it was going to be one she was going to have to clean real hard if she wanted to use it again. So she used one she didn't normally use, or gave me one she didn't normally use. You know, I went outside and handed it to Dad. He put it down. He said, "How about pour some gas into that, son?" So I opened up the gas can. You know how the spout is usually inside, and I turned it over and hooked it on there and lifted it with all my weight and slopped gas all over everything. got some gas into the bowl, and he said, "That's good, that's good. You can stop now." And I'd close it up. And he'd put the spark plug in there and swish it around, wipe it off with an old rag, check it to make sure the contact distance was what it was supposed to be, put it back in, put the lead on it, and then try and crank it again. It run for about maybe a half a minute, and then it stopped. He'd say, "I'm gonna have to take this thing apart again." I'd say, "Yes, sir, I guess you are," because I knew it was going to happen. He said, "Can you hand me a spanner, son?" So I'd reach in the toolbox and hand it to him. And he'd commence taking it apart. He'd take out everything. He took out the cylinder from the piston. And he had that in that gas. I don't know what all he did because I never learned. He never actually explained to me what he was doing. He just did what he had to do. But anyway, he'd have the whole thing apart. All the parts would be around. He'd clean them all in the gas, wipe them down, clean them up so that they were spick and span practically, oil everything up, put it all back together, piston in, and put the spark plug in, attach it to the wire. Then he'd check the oil to make sure that it had enough oil. If it didn't, he'd put oil in it. And after he had everything together, now we had started maybe at 10 o'clock. And already it was like close to 3 with everything he'd been doing. And Mom looked out the door and said, "Shall I put the kettle on?" He said, "Yes, that would be nice. Let's have a cup of tea, son." This was before he started it. So Mom would put the kettle on. She'd make a pot of tea. We'd come inside. No lunch or anything. Just a pot of tea. And we'd sit there and we'd have a cup of tea. Then he'd say, "Well, I guess we should go out and see if it starts now, boy." So I said, "Yes, sir." And then I get to cut the grass. He said, "Yes." Well, he'd put the knot in the little groove, wrap the rope around it, put his foot on the lawnmower and yank it, and it cranked right up with a good roar. And it was running, it purred. He had it running real good. You could see the smile on his face because he had accomplished what he had set out to do. He had that thing running perfectly. So I said, "Can I cut now?" And he said, let me go see how it works first. Let me see if it cuts all right." So I watched him go out and run down the grass or run down the yard, and the size of the lawnmower cut a shaft of it down there and came back. And I said, "Can I take it now?" And he said, "Let me just do it." And then by the time he was ready for me to do it, he had already cut the backyard. And now the sun was going down. So we put it up. And I said, "Can I cut it tomorrow?" He said, yeah, I just wanted to see how it ran after, or how it cut after I fixed it up. Well, the next morning, we'd get up. He'd go out there, pull it out, go to the front yard, crank it up, and just cut the front grass. Dad always said if he wanted something done, he wanted it done right. And he didn't, I don't think he trusted me to do it. He thought I was too young. But every single time, because he would cut it again, it would be a 2 weeks to a month when it would be time to cut the grass again. And that old lawnmower just wouldn't crank. Just wouldn't crank. So he'd have to go through that whole routine again. And since he never really let me cut the grass, my whole day was gone. I might have wanted to go up to the terrace with my friends, but not that particular Saturday, because I'd be sitting there waiting. But that was all right. I tell you, I'd give anything to be able to go back and sit and watch him work and share that time with him. I really would. Now, he worked on the car all the time too. Not just the lawnmower, but the car. And he always had it running tip-top. And every time he would do it on Saturday, I'd stand there. And he'd say, go get the torch. And I'd get the light. He'd say, how about hold it right here where I'm working on this. And I would be standing over him with that light, just like that. I was one of the best light holders around. Except whenever I'd kind of drift off and he'd say, hey, wait, you're taking the light off what I'm doing. I can't see. Put that light back here. That was my job, holding that light. I got to be an expert. But like I say, I'd give anything to be able to hold that light for him again. That was our Saturdays together. That was how we spent time together. That was his thing. He loved fixing things. He had a mind. He could listen, and he knew exactly what was wrong with it. And he'd go in and he'd fix it. And he wouldn't stop until he was finished with it. I remember whenever he was working on that first Buick he ever had. Or maybe it was the Anglia. It was the Anglia. We had 1950-something Anglia. And he had to replace the pistons. And he worked on that from the morning until the next morning when the sun came up. We were out there with a light hanging under it so he could work on this car. But he did not stop. He didn't eat. He had a cup of tea. But he would not eat until he had finished it. That was when he was very young, though. He was, I would say he was like 35 maybe, whenever he did that. He was brilliant when it came to fixing cars. But you know, you can't do that anymore. He lost interest whenever the computers began to be part of the engine because you had to have special equipment to do that. Before he could go in, he could make things to make it work. I had a problem with my MG and got stuck in town. It just stopped on me. I called him and told him, and he came into town. I was in a parking lot behind a Five and Dime. And he said, well, your electrical line is all messed up. He said, how about going to, well, I think it was Woolworths I was buying. He said, how about going to Woolworths and buy a couple of extension cords, which I did. Came out with them. And he used those two extension cords to make my electrical lines work. He cut them up and wired them up and electrical taped them up. Car cranked right up. And I was able to drive it around for quite some time. He loved solving those problems. Loved it. I sure miss him. Well, I was just thinking about cutting the grass, but it could never be as much fun as it was back in those days, even though I did not think it was fun at the time. But looking back, wouldn't have traded those times for anything. Hope everybody's doing okay. Y'all take care of yourselves. Hope you have a good weekend. Hope you have a beautiful sunny day like it is out there. Humidity's down. It's kind of warm, but it's not as bad as what it normally is because humidity's about maybe 60%, where it's normally 70 or 80. And it's really miserable then. Smoke a good pipe. Smoke some good tobacco. Take care of yourselves, and God bless you.